And welcome everyone to episode 45 of One Piece at a Time, the One Piece read-through podcast where we read and discuss 5 chapters of the One Piece manga each and every week. Although this week, we're taking a short break from the manga to talk about the first One Piece movie. One Piece, the movie. So I'm your host, Derek Bittner, and I'm joined by my wonderful co-host and freelance letterer at Shonen Jump, Brandon Bovia. How you doing, Brandon?
Make sure you get your popcorn, everybody. I'm, of course, Brandon Bovia, the English letterer of manga like Kaiju number 8 and Dragon Ball Super. And now Naruto somehow. Just for a little bit here, it seems.
You're just racking it up.
Yeah, just one after another. Right? There's like dozens of other manga that I work on that I don't talk about on here. Just like, here's the handful that everybody probably knows.
We'd be here a while.
Yeah, exactly. I just couldn't even fathom listing it off. Anyway, we're here to talk about the first One Piece movie, like you said here. I've actually never seen this first one.
See, that's amazing to me because I remember being so into it. I watched off the old Kaizoku fan subs. Mm-hmm. And I think they had them all lined up, so I would just watch them when it became time. Or maybe got to them later. I forget exactly how. But I still watched the first 6 movies, basically up until the Alabasta retelling. But it's also, I only watched them once.
Yeah.
And I remember there being 2 that I really liked. I thought the others were all kind of basic, but it's, been a while. You get older and sort of opinions change and see how you react, and it's a fun blast for the past almost for this one because we were debating whether or not to cover the movies as part of this, because this is technically a manga read through, and we're getting into the Oda's getting into the final arc for One Piece, but we're not confident he'll finish that in the 3 or 4 years it'll be until we actually catch up to him. So not a bad idea to give him a little extra space.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, there's 14 or 15 movies now, less if you skip like the recap ones.
Yeah, and I don't know if we'll skip those or not. I think I'd kind of be curious to see how they handle the recap.
I think one of them is different enough that I think does warrant an episode, but we'll get to it when we get to it. But yeah, certainly I think I think this is sort of since we already we finished Alabasta last week, so I feel like it's a good chance to sort of catch up on the sort of the movies that had been released in the meantime.
The idea here is that we'll be squeezing in the movies from now on whenever they would have released in the manga timeline. So, for example, the first One Piece movie released March 4th, 2000 in Japan, which roughly puts it releasing between chapters 125 and 126, which is right before Mr. 3 is defeated in Little Garden. Mm-hmm. But the One Piece anime had only just started, really, at this point. So it's actually between episodes 16 and 17 of the anime, which is right before Kuro is defeated and Usopp joins the crew on the Going Merry.
That is incredible to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That much of a gap existed before we start this whole thing up. And it's weird to go back that far, but it's also weird that it's there. So the plan right now is by the time where we're at, the first 3 movies have been released in terms of production of the manga.
Yeah.
And at every point after that, whenever we get to where the next movie would have been, at least in the manga release, that's when we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
And get these extra adventures.
Before we get into this one proper, can I take a second? Because this is so... The timing couldn't have been funnier for us to start covering the movies. That I went and saw One Piece Film Red over the weekend.
That's right.
And I wanted just to sort of give my quick little thoughts on it. And that I saw it twice, once subbed, once dubbed, just because a friend of mine invited me out to see the dub version. And I didn't expect this, that I think I have more issues with it than any of the other modern One Piece movies, but I like it more than all of them. It is my second favorite behind movie 6, which is, one of the classic ones we'll get here to soon-ish. But it is such an interesting, flawed and messy movie, but has such a really strong emotional core to it that I was compelled by the end. But it is interesting for me to think about, and then I have a whole laundry list of man, this is kind of that's great, but I think a lot of people love it more unequivocally than I do, and I do unequivocally love it, but it is one of those this is kind of weird and messy, but I sort of love that over maybe sort of the movies that are maybe a bit more polished to a sheen, if that makes any sense. So
I think that you kind of prefer, like, it's not perfect, but there's something appealing about
it. It has really interesting flaws, which I was not expecting. And I just, but like, I think by the end, I was like, yeah, it's good. So definitely,
awesome.
If it's still in theaters by the time you're listening to this somehow, go watch it. Both the sub and the dub are fantastic. Music, of course, plays a really large role in the story, but the dub wasn't able to dub the songs in times, which is a little bit jarring. I'm hoping that they'll be able to by the time the Blu-ray releases.
Yeah, that one would hope so.
'Cause it sounds like a licensing problem.
Oh,
more than anything.
I could see that.
Yeah. So they probably didn't have time to do it, but I think they could do a good job localizing the songs if they're given the chance. So
I think so. I mean, I'm looking forward to seeing it. It seems to have a lot of hype. Did very well in theaters.
Oh yeah, it did surprisingly well here.
Manga current.
Yes, it spoils anime onlys.
Oh, does it? Oh boy.
Which is funny about us covering things sort of in the manga timeline. So it's perfect, because if we were covering the anime, I think we would be kind of like, what is that? But
hey, it worked out. I'll take it.
It's subtle. Like they don't explain or really, but they show something that the anime has not gotten to yet.
Okay.
And there's just other little like nods here and there, and I think the manga had its own little nod to Film Red recently too.
Oh,
so cool. I don't know if it can't really be canon, but I think sort of like some of the like recent One Piece movies have been kind of like the characters are canon, but the things that happen aren't, or some sort of like weird nonsense like that.
Yeah, I can see that. Seeing a few of them, I'm like, okay, I could definitely see that idea. We'll see how well One Piece movies slot into what's going on in there, because Dragon Ball movies are infamous for just not being possible at all.
Yeah. I think that the manga basically for the past like 8-10 years is basically there's no room. There's no room for the movies to slot in, so they just don't try, which I respect.
Yeah, sometimes you just don't have to. Shouldn't worry about it.
Yeah.
The other cool thing before we get into this movie is you noticed a shirt.
Oh yeah, that's right. Oh my gosh, just the most. I was holding back my laughter the first time I saw it in the theater. Is that throughout the vast majority of Film Red, Luffy is wearing our podcast logo on his shirt.
You sent me that and I was blown away. It's like, no way.
And like, I don't remember when the first trailer for Film Red dropped. I feel like it had to have been after we started this podcast, like 100%.
Like we started like a year ago. I have not looked up anything about Film Red because I don't want to be spoiled.
Of course,
and I know the designer Daniel Alba, who created the logo for us, he doesn't watch One Piece. I'm pretty sure.
He doesn't know anything. So it's just like I see it as a form of respect, just a little bit of like, all right, yeah, Luffy probably listens to the podcast. Recap his own adventures. He's not going to remember.
It's like, maybe I should look into merch. I don't know what it takes to do merch, but like maybe I should do that just for that shirt.
Like the logo that Daniel did for us is so good that I would have it on almost anything.
That is true. But man, just have a shirt like just out of Film Red, because I actually on Twitter when I mentioned this, had a father said that their son had seen the movie and wanted that shirt, so he would be down for it. Like,
that's so awesome.
So, didn't expect that one.
Yeah,
so
I didn't.
It's a good time. It's for getting into these movies.
Yeah, a good time for getting into this podcast too, if you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, exactly. One last thing before we get into this, because the movie is only 50 minutes long. It's not a long movie. It's not really a feature. And there's a reason for that. It's because it was released as a double feature along with Digimon Adventure Our War Game, which is the second Digimon movie at Toei Animation's 2000 Spring Anime Fair, which is so weird that One Piece was coming out online at the same time as Our War Game, which was basically the basis for Summer Wars eventually, and how the director of Our War Game would direct the 6th One Piece movie.
Yeah. It's just a hilarious like little bit of the way things lined up like that is so funny that he would be double billed with a One Piece movie to then go on to even Mamoru Hosoda directed a couple episodes of the anime, I think, slightly before, or I think it was like in preparation for directing movie 6. I could not tell you which episodes off the top of my head, but definitely just one of those cool like, oh yeah, that happened. Like double billing for anime movies for like these kinds of properties is super common, and is certainly why most of them from this era, both like One Piece and even a lot of like the early Dragon Ball movies, they're like 50 minutes long because they're usually shown alongside something else.
That makes sense. 2 short movies. That sounds fun, kind of honestly. But let's go ahead and dive into One Piece, the movie, right off the bat. And we begin with a legend of an East Blue pirate named Woonin, who was known, I believe, as the Great Gold Pirate. Just amassed a massive amount of gold, robbing almost exclusively from those with excessive gold, and just basically a Robin Hood figure.
Yeah.
Just enough that it would glitter at night, and just amazingly wealthy. However, he suddenly faded away and was seen no more. But this great gold pirate apparently left all his treasure on a remote island before he died, and only a single map shows where it could be. So pirates continue to search the East Blue in hopes of finding this island and get his treasure. So there's our setup for what is going on here and what this is all about.
I'm going to probably point this out a lot over the course of this discussion, but like we just talked about, how these movies were double billed here just earlier. And like, you notice this with a lot of like those early Dragon Ball Z movies too, where the setup is sort of a mishmash of familiar elements from canon. So like, like Wunan is he's basically this film's Gold Roger, more or less.
Right.
And I sort of really appreciate that they're sort of like remixing a lot of the vibes more so than maybe ripping off just like one arc or one story from One Piece wholesale. This to me feels so much just like we took everything from the first like 40 chapters of the manga and like threw it into a blender.
You can definitely feel that sense here and there, and
it's familiar, but not overly so.
Not overly so. It still feels unique because we get our introduction to a young boy in a box who comes across this ship that's just been completely ravaged by our villain, who grabs the map to Wunin's treasure and just laughs. And he has this like lion like design to him, which we'll of course get there more, but. The beautiful thing is that because this takes place between Syrup Village and Baratier, you can just completely point this as a filler that takes place between the two. It's just in movie form.
Yeah. It's basically like a filler arc in movie form. But like, I think being 50 minutes does a lot in its favor. Just because like it knows what it is and is just sort of like short, tight, get in, get out. I really appreciated that.
It's almost an advertisement for the TV show because they start with the anime opening.
Yeah.
It's just this straight up anime opening
with this awkward widescreen crop.
Yeah, and then some extra sound effects for whatever reason.
Yeah. Actually, this would be a good time. I'm sorry, we're just taking so long to get into the meat of the story, but like the thing that blew me away most with this movie is that like it's actually animated on cells.
Yeah, there's a nice texture to it.
Yeah, it has such a different look to it compared to like literally anything else in the franchise, because the anime started digital, and has been digital since episode 1. So the fact that for some reason, I don't know if it was just like a film production timelines or anything, like this takes place in that transition. Most anime did the analog to digital transition in like 99, 2000, 2001 or so. Mm-hmm. So sort of like seeing this different flavor of One Piece is really interesting. And I wanted to mention that because they do just like reuse the anime opening, and you can, at least I can tell that because the anime opening is animated digitally, they like filmed the digital opening they printed the digital art on the cells and filmed it, so it does it has a different look to it than the movie itself, but like I don't know, it's so cool. It's such a cool time capsule. I
don't know, it's kind of fun in that way.
Yeah, exactly.
It just amused me that we have a movie that features only Luffy, Zoro, Nami, and Usopp, and it prominently features
Sanji's in the opening. He's not even in the crew, which I guess that applied to the anime too, but it's even funnier here because it's a one-off.
What else is new? We start off with Zoro and Luffy starving because they're completely out of food, and meanwhile Nami's randomly thinking about Wunin's treasure.
Yeah, just
I would say it's random, but it also kind of works for manga readers because it makes sense that she'd be looking for this because she wants that,
collecting money for Arlong.
Yeah,
I thought about that.
It completely makes sense that she'd want this treasure map and this treasure, especially if it had, what did it say, a third of the world's gold?
Yeah, something crazy like that.
Just blown away by it, but yeah, it's like, you know what? At the time, it's just like, oh, she's greedy and randomly wants this money. But in retrospect, it's like, ooh, she's actually out for something here. Like, there's a reason.
That brings me to a point, like, just in sort of broad terms. I really love the way, like, the writing, like, nails everybody's personalities. Like, it feels like it could have come from Oda himself right out of the manga. In, like, some of these early scenes in the movie just have, like, maybe even more so than the anime, that can feel a little stretched out. Like, the comedic timing in this movie is on point. And it feels like it is straight out of the manga.
I got a kick out of Usopp's dumb, like, I caught a big one, the biggest fish in the world, and he pulls up a bottle.
Yeah.
It actually has that elephant fish tuna thing that Sanji later gets.
Like funny little stuff like that. It puts a smile on my face.
It really shows off the actors.
Yeah, for sure.
That's one thing to say is that I am typically a dub guy. I like the dub, and I think the One Piece dub is good. But I've watched so much of this anime with the sub. It's so hard to go switch completely over to the dub.
This cast is iconic. Like, it just is. you could have them fart around doing almost anything, and I would probably listen to the Japanese cast. Like, the dynamic they have on display here is just fantastic.
I forget the actress who plays Luffy, but she
Mayumi Tanaka.
Tanaka, who also voiced Krillin in Dragon Ball.
Yep.
She is just incredible as Luffy. Nails every part of it, even though she's basically giving him the Krillin voice.
Yeah. It has its own little charm to it. It's one of those things where I guess it's funny that you have people who, like, I don't think anybody questions Mayumi Tanaka's Luffy, but you still have fans who can't get over, like the very female sounding Goku in the sub Dragon Ball, even though it's very similar.
I'd say so, yeah. Again, you're right about the humor. It's like the reason they're starving is that Luffy ate a month worth of supplies in 3 days.
It's really rough that they don't have Sanji yet.
Yeah, and he's proud of it.
Yes.
And then they start fighting over a single grain of rice as 3 random guys board the ship. And thanks to the wiki, I believe their names are Danny, Donnie, and Denny.
I don't think... Are they named at any point in this movie?
No.
Yeah, I was going to say...
They're not named at any point.
Oh, that's wonderful.
But yeah, they get on board and take all of Nami's treasure and run off.
And like, throw them some rice balls in exchange, and they're just completely like, oh, yes!
Yeah. She's like trying to convince them to go fight, and she's like, but you already stole that stuff, so who cares? But yeah, then they get the rice balls. It's like, wow, these guys are actually kind of effective at distracting these guys.
Yeah.
And Luffy's like asking for more, and all of a sudden just gets shot in the head.
This might be like any other time when Luffy gets shot, because of course at this point like, oh yeah, he's immune to bullets, and but just like the sort of slow fall, and then he just like rises right back up and is like, these guys are bad. It's destroyed me.
I imagine if somebody was there for Digimon and not watched One Piece at this point, and was watching this, and like, oh my god, he can take a bullet. Like, that would actually be a legit shocking moment. And then they just start unleashing, and he just grabs hold and gets right into it.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, it is a stupid, funny intro, and I don't know. I just kind of as you said, it nails that tone.
Yeah, it feels like what a good movie, like one of these sort of franchise movies, I think needs to be able to do is like establish who everybody is really quickly, like for the people who have no idea. And I feel like here in the first like 6-7 minutes of the film, you already sort of get the vibe. You understand what Luffy's about, what Usopp and Nami and Zoro are about, and it's just I think it is it's basic, but it is a surprisingly effective opener.
Yeah, and it also establishes like, okay, we have this kid from the opening that was tied up and working for these pirates, and he's kind of got caught up in Luffy's attack. He's sort of knocked out, and that's when our villain shows up, El Drago, who is getting ready to do his power while they abandon ship and run off.
I had no idea what this guy's devil fruit power was. So the fact that they introduced him by shooting a laser beam, I just was like, what?
Yeah, he has a mouth laser.
Yeah.
So he completely wrecks the sea, separating Luffy from the others, because Luffy's still on the little boat. But Zoro immediately jumps in to rescue him because, can't swim. So immediate separation of the group.
And it's kind of a benefit that they only have 4 members at this point, because you can split them really easily at this point. You can just kind of all right, you guys go here, you guys are going to go here, and then you'll come back at the end.
And I find that they're really effective at giving something for each of them to do.
Yeah, exactly. Which, as you could imagine, I think the more we'll get on, the more they kind of struggle with that.
Yeah, I believe it. Like, how do you figure out how to get how many characters to do something at all times?
Yeah.
But I love this moment. Like, Luffy and Zoro are just hanging out, and then they smell food, and they just
just right to it.
Scream out Odin as they go to this tiny ship. And the animation here is just wonderful. The way it makes you appreciate that over the manga and what animation brings to it.
Yeah, for sure. Like, there's so much personality in the animation here, even if it in terms of looks, it is sort of just like a slightly nicer looking anime episode. But if you've only read the manga like we have up to this point, seeing everybody with voices and in motion is just it really feels like these characters have been brought to life.
It's a treat. It works. And I just appreciate the way Luffy eats. Yeah. The way they show him eating is so good. Just completely stuffing his face and just, I don't know, that one shot of him just grabbing a little bit from each onto the plate, dump it in his mouth. It's just good.
That subtle little stretch of his cheeks. It's just so full of character.
Just all gone in that big fight. Again, I think the big strength of this movie, because I think we can go ahead and say it, this movie's just okay.
It's just okay.
It's a shonen anime movie.
Yeah.
That's all it is. That's, there's nothing too special about it. It's just another adventure for the group, but it highlights the group.
Yeah.
And the adventure and the humor of this is so freaking good.
Yeah. I think credit where credit is due. It could be so much worse. There are a lot worse versions of this formula. So I was I'm surprised by how just you did a good job, we'll get into it, but there's just sort of little subtle touches here and there where I'm these people knew what they were making, and they knew how to tell their story in the most effective way possible, even you just within the limitations of what you can realistically do in 50 minutes.
I agree. So yeah, we get the usual thing for these type of filler ideas where Luffy, of course, agrees to, declares he's going to be Pirate King.
Yeah.
Interested in Runon because I'm going to make him his friend. And it's okay, that's interesting.
Yeah.
And this Tobio, this kid that they rescued, his dream is to find Runon and join his crew. He doesn't want to be an Odin maker like his grandfather here, who I believe is named Gonzo, we later learn.
Yeah, Gonzo.
And Gonzo has a great joke off the bat.
Yeah.
Totaling up everything they ate. Just so much stuff, and you're just expecting to be extremely expensive.
He's got the abacus out, and he's just typing like a madman.
And it's 11 berries.
Yes. I love he puts up one for each finger, and he just sort of looks left and right. It's great.
And the amazing thing is they still can't pay it.
Yeah. Which is even funnier.
And then you pointed this out because they don't translate it in this, but Luffy hands him a rock, basically
my token of my gratitude.
Which you say is basically just IOU from future Pirate King.
Yeah. It has eventual in parentheses, eventual or future, whatever. But yeah, it just it's just an IOU, just crappy drawn on a marker. On a rock.
And then he gets roped back in before he can leave.
Oh, man.
It works because it's hints of the Baratier arc before Baratier for anime watchers.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking that too. We'll see it in the next scene where we sort of get a little bit more on El Drago. He's basically Don Krieg. with maybe a little bit of Buggy.
With a little bit of Buggy, but definitely more of a gold obsession than anything else rather than power or military things.
Yeah.
He has a decent design, but we see that Nami's already snuck on board.
I do want to say one just quick aside about El Drago is that for a One Piece villain at this part in the story, he's massive. One Piece is no stranger to it's absurdly tall villains, but we kind of get more of them as the story goes on, and I feel he has to be the tallest one we've seen so far.
He fits those later designs so well.
Yeah, be right at home.
I assume Oda helped design some of these characters.
That tends to be the case, but I don't know for this one in particular. But they do tend to get the manga artists to design original characters for these sorts of projects.
Right. I appreciate it. I mean, maybe it's Oda saying like, let's test some things before we get to me doing these type of character designs.
For sure.
But either way, they find the island, which that is another complaint of mine. For as secret as this island is and this whole map thing, it is so freaking easy to find.
Yeah, they just get there. Like
These guys have a map, so that makes sense. And Nami gets there because she snuck on board their ship. But Usopp ended up here because that's where
he crashed with the
Going Mary ended up.
Yeah, they just crashed on shore with it.
And then it's later, but then the Odin shop just appears there.
Yeah, like I mean,
how has nobody found this place? It's the East Blue. There's not even anything weird about this sea.
Yeah, it's just here. I don't know. Maybe it's just a little out of the way, and nobody would have thought. I don't know. Nobody would have thought to go there if they didn't have a treasure map specifically leading them there. I don't know. Yeah,
maybe. One other little touch I did enjoy is that Usopp's on the island. Nami's watching him, and he's sneaking around in a barrel.
Yeah.
And he bursts out of it in the same way that Luffy does.
Oh, I didn't know. Yeah. Oh, I didn't see it.
Even screaming out, I feel well rested, except he gets caught.
Oh, that's so good.
Great callback.
Oh, that's awesome.
For Usopp.
Yeah.
Of course, it doesn't work out at all. I don't know. I think it's just
it's a fun little
coincidence.
Joke. Yeah.
But of course, Usopp is caught and has to lie his way to get anywhere. So I like that they play up what he's capable of, because Usopp is definitely the humor almost of this one.
God, and just the voice actor for Usopp, Kappei Yamaguchi, like he is so good at that sort of like fast talking, like off the cuff, just trying to like BS his way out of a bad situation. And I loved this scene for how much Usopp is just like playing up. Oh yeah, I know where it is. Oh yeah, I can take you there. And like the lies keep escalating, and he is so desperate, but it's so hilarious.
I like that. We get this little indication of our other villain, serious villain, this Golas, who's like uses an Indian design and like gets paid, has to be paid each time before he does something,
which is kind of a fun gimmick. Like just throwing him gold every time.
Yeah, and Usopp's first attempts to like I get a little insight into El Drago's whole thing, because he's like, hey, I got diamonds, rubies, all that stuff. I know where to find it. And he's like, I don't care. I want gold. And he's like, oh yeah, I know where gold is too. And he's just like, yay, gold.
I think that's your sort of first indication that El Drago might be a little bit of a dumbass.
Yeah, exactly. And of course, every time he tries to sneak out of it, it's like, oh, it's impossible without a map. Oh, hey, here's a map.
Yeah, it's like, oh god.
All right, well, sure. So I guess you get your first clue. Mm-hmm. Basically, it's the opposite direction of sail. It's like where the tail of this whale faces.
It's a riddle with a neat little twist on it, which it's more than you think it is, which I appreciate.
I also love how like shocked they are. It's like if the if the whale's facing west, then his tail's facing east, and they're like, oh my god, yes.
Yeah, I love that. Like Usopp breaks the fourth wall. He just looks right into the camera. He's like, man, these guys are dumb.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if I've ever seen a character break the fourth wall like that in One Piece, and it is so good. Usopp is the right character to do that with. He's just like, oh.
Yeah, it works.
Yeah.
And then we just get the ridiculous of Nami, again, spotting this Odin shop who just happened to make landing here so they can wash the dishes. And they're tied up, like Zoro and Luffy are tied up with like
a lock and chain or like an anchor.
Yeah, lock and chain with an anchor and all that. And Nami sees is just like, I'm going to ignore this.
Yeah, it's like, I'm going to pretend I didn't see that. It's so good. So in character.
Oh god. But we get our motivation for Tobio. He doesn't want to do about Odin. He doesn't find Odin interesting or important. He wants to find Wunan and join his crew, and finally takes off. But he tears off Luffy's hat, which is why Luffy chases after him.
Yeah. I do love how sort of like effortlessly he's like, all right, time to go. Like just hops off as if the block and chain is really not much of a problem for them to contend with at all. But I do sort of love. It feels very much like the manga, where sort of like the strongest characters are kind of incapacitated in a dumb and goofy way.
Yes.
Yeah.
They definitely have that nailed at this point.
Yeah. And actually, it feels a little more natural than some of the manga's versions of it, honestly.
Yeah, it kind of does. It kind of does. I love this ongoing joke, by the way, of every time Luffy runs and does stuff, Zoro gets conked in the head by the anchor.
Yeah. he's
the
just
little
knocked
dong.
out.
It just keeps happening. It's amazing. Like,
Yeah.
it's so dumb, but so funny.
Yeah. It just, again, this team understands that One Piece slapstick.
Oh, gosh. But of course, that gives us our Luffy bonding moments with Tobio, where he's like, yes, you should totally work towards your goals. And this has Tobio like starting to crack, but also being like, whatever.
Yeah, Tobio's definitely the most boring part of this movie for me.
Yeah,
as
I mean,
it's your sort of like every sort of Shonen Jump anime movie has to have like that kid character, who's just sort of like loud and has to bond.
I have this
character.
ambition.
You've seen it 1,000 times, folks.
Yeah, it's nothing too crazy or anything like that, but the way they weave them together and have Nami running in the forest and she comes across Usopp and the pirates as they're going around, it's very deftly handled like more than you'd expect. But then that's when you find out that Usopp's basically lying and saying, I'm part of Wunon's crew. It's like, no, that's not true. We killed them all.
Did they really?
I mean, we did see all the blood and stuff on that ship.
Yeah, that's true. That didn't quite register to me the first time I watched it.
I mean, the crazy thing is that Wunon, who somehow got all this, like a third of the world's gold, got defeated by these guys. And
seriously.
Yeah.
And
we know that power scaling.
I think it's probably more that El Drago beat them because he can shoot laser beams. I understand that part, but yeah, the rest of his crew, they just look like bumbling goofballs.
Mm-hmm. It makes you wonder how Wunon got that.
Yeah.
the third of the gold, but oh well. Either way, again, just the entertainment of Usopp trying to convince them that he's never lied in his life.
Yeah,
they can completely trust him.
Yeah, the escalating lies it's just so in character for Usopp and handled. It's so quick and handled so well.
And I do like these demonstrations of strength because, okay, we need to put Golos as this big threat.
Yeah.
So here's a roadblock, and then he just completely wipes out.
This is pretty much the only time he's established as a threat, but it is enough, I think, for me, for like what happens later on.
Yeah.
Sort of like,
again, it's not a long movie. There's not a lot of characters in this, so it makes sense you need to just have this one thing.
Like, you see a big, powerful guy with a sword, and you're just like, okay, yeah, Zoro's going to fight that guy.
Yeah, pretty much.
That was pretty much my reaction. I was like, oh, yeah, okay, yep.
So, okay, that's fine. But they finally make it to Wunon's castle, this big old place, and they're like, all right, so where's the gold? Just the way he moves when he's saying his stomach is growling. The animation is so freaking good and just so rubbery.
Yeah, they know what they're doing.
But fortunately for him, Nami shows up to save him, claiming that he's Kamisuke while she's Josephine, the granddaughter of Wunon.
It doesn't really amount to much, but just like that sort of on the fly thinking of like, all right, Nami's got to make up fake names just kind of because. It makes complete and total sense. Like, they're just so random, but all right, cool.
And Usopp playing around with it, and it's like, oh, it's under this gate. Oh, you need to dig for 3 days in order to find the gold. But I would never. Oh, I know, I accidentally said. And she's like, that's too much. But they're still idiots enough to like, yeah, we get it.
Yeah,
dig under the gate. Cool, we'll do it. Just that Nami smile to the camera. It's so good.
Yeah, again, she's also these two breaking the fourth wall. It's just fantastic.
Nami and Usopp interacting is always a lot of fun.
Yeah, for sure. It reminded me a little bit of like some of those bits from Arlong Park, if it wasn't like a life or death situation.
Right. But Wunon's like, oh yeah, I don't need 3 days. I'm going to use my power.
Yeah.
And that's when we find out what devil fruit he is. It is they don't translate it here. It's just the goe fruit.
Yeah, which
I looked it up.
Like
I believe
voice or sound, like voice. Yeah.
Yeah, I translated it as like the shout fruit.
Yeah.
Hey, that works. And it's like, Yeah, I can see that not really being a thing.
I think that the jump from that to laser beams is sort of okay. Sure, fine.
Sure.
It's funny when you think about at this point in the story, it is kind of like a massive jump because the only other devil fruit user we've like seen is Buggy.
That is true.
Yeah. So
he's technically the third devil fruit user.
Yeah, which is
for anime viewers.
I think that's sort of where it lost me a little bit, is just sort of like not the the voice or the shout necessarily, but the like, oh, he's big and powerful and has to, he can shoot laser beams. It's kind of like, all right, for this point in the story, it feels a little odd.
It's
honestly, even where we're at in the manga, it feels a little odd.
Yeah,
for out here in the East Blue,
it is, but it's also just like, fortunately, they never give him a bounty. They don't say whether he's based in the East Blue or anything like that. There's enough vague details that it just works
for certain,
and it definitely feels like you need to have some sort of power for him in order for him to attempt to be threatening to Luffy.
He looks like some sort of a threat.
And of course Luffy shows up at this point while he's destroying the castle. He's like, no, Woonin, are you there? Like, can you help?
Yeah, he's like, oh, don't kill him.
Again, this interaction is just like, who are you? Oh, I'm Luffy and this is Zoro. And he just
he turns around.
Zoro can say, yo.
Yeah, I cracked up at that. It's just the sort of quick snappy character. It's just great.
It is so freaking good. But of course, it's our chance to be like, okay, Moonin's obviously dead, and Tobio's like, no, he can't be dead. I'm not going to let you,
don't
this
give up
villain,
on your dreams.
Do whatever he wants.
Yeah,
that whole thing, and he goes to kill Tobio, but man, I love Luffy and Zoro working together. Zoro using just the one sword style in his mouth, cuts off his fingernails, and actually the two of them working together does pretty well. Luffy holding the anchor.
Look, they're tied together. They got one brain cell to share, and it seems like that's enough. But I actually, I appreciate how much they get out of Luffy and Zoro being like tied together. It feels, like I said before, it feels natural. Like it feels like they have sort of enough ideas about what to do with it, and it lasts for just about the right amount of time.
And of course, we got the joke of Zoro very likely being able to handle Wunon no problem by
easily.
himself.
Yeah.
But Luffy's leg got caught, and they get flung away into the distance after bumping into the castle. And well, they're finally separate from all of them, and they all meet back up at the whale. Thanks, Nanami, they're finally free of the chains.
Yeah. I like that. I would assume El Dorado probably like. I don't think he ever finds out Usopp and Nami's real names. He's just like, where did Josephine and Kamisuke go? Like, did he ever? No? Okay. I'm just going to run with that bit.
Yeah. All right. It's a good thing they met back up at the whale, because they're like, all right, well, it's the castle's destroyed, so I guess the gold is there. But Nami's like, no, it's not there. And turns out she stole the map. She's all good. She's like, it's probably a decoy, so it's probably elsewhere. And hey, there's a special trick here. We just need to light this match, hold it under, and we can figure out where it actually is.
I thought this was just going to be another one of those like exposition scenes. So the fact that it just completely burns to a crisp is
I laugh so hard.
I was not expecting that.
Because you don't see Nami screw up like this.
Yeah,
often.
Exactly.
Like to see her get in on this type of comedy, is pretty great, and the timing is so good.
Yeah.
But of course, that's when it's revealed. Like, okay, Usopp's like, well, the only clue I had was this whole thing about the whale, but it turns out the tail's not pointing east; it's pointing north towards a giant plateau.
Which I mean, on the one hand, I really appreciate that, like. There's this extra little twist to it. The hint says this, but it's like just a little bit. But at the same time, like I feel like this like giant hill is really impossible to miss. Like it's like the tail is pointing to the most inconspicuous part of the island.
And then just very odd moments, like all of a sudden they run, like as they're climbing this plateau, which gives me vague hints of like ideas of Drum Island, even though they were not even close to Drum Island in the manga at this point. Of course, not near as much of a problem, but they ran into this random cave where Gonzo, the Grandpa Gonzo, is there.
This part, it's a little bit of nonsense. He just got here somehow.
And turns out he and Wunon grew up in the same village, and they had their own different dreams. So Wunon's whole motivation is that his father was a miner, and worked his entire life and basically just got one rock of gold for his entire life's work. And that's just frustrating to Wunan. So he wants to travel the seas, become a pirate, and take gold from those who have too much. Basically bad people, Robin Hood at all.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Gonzo's like, your father was a good man. Yeah, he didn't get a lot of gold, but he was very compassionate and he always complimented my Odin. And you know what? Gold is nice and all, but it can't laugh or make you happy. It's basically just a rock. So, hey, I just want to make good Odin. And that causes them to get into a fight.
I think this flashback is actually where I turned around on this movie for the better. This is sort of the like, okay, there's something here, and I think the anime staff here sort of understands like the emotional core of One Piece, and it just Wunan and Gonzo kind of having like this extra little wrinkle to their relationship. I think is especially how it ties into near the end is like surprisingly well done for what this is.
Yeah, it captures that just inkling of One Piece spirit.
Yeah.
Because if it was just Tobio and Tobio looking up to Wunan, it'd be just every other standard anime movie.
Yeah.
And it's mostly that. But there's one scene of the two of them fighting and Gonzo's sacrifice because they fall off the cliff because they're trying to get the flag that the pirate flag that Wunan's going to use. And Gonzo chooses to fall into the sea so his friend can live out his dream. Like he thinks his friend's dream is dumb and maybe not as worthwhile because it's just not going to end up happy, but he still wants to see his friend go on a dream.
Yeah.
And so he drops off. He survives thanks to a passing ship, but in the meantime, Wunan leaves for his journey.
I love this gag where it's just like, wait, did you die? Or Luffy asking the guy telling the story if he died.
Yes. So that's when you died.
It's like, well, okay.
But the whole thing, the reason that Gonzo has Odin on his head is that Wunan always refused to eat his Odin. But he thinks with this batch, he'll actually eat it. And he's put his life's work into it. This is his big dream. And Luffy's like, all right, let's do this. He'll definitely eat it. And they get to the top where there's a house with nothing in it, except for a very conspicuous fireplace that they easily push aside and find.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, Zoro just they're like, wow, so cool.
Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, did he just walk up?
But before they can actually descend, of course, have the whole house destroyed thanks to El Drago, and he's like, oh hey, we figured it out. we knew where to go.
Yeah,
let's search this place, get this gold, and. In the meantime, he beats up Gonzo and sees that it's just Odin. And when he hears that it's like he poured his life into it, and it's the fact that it's not gold, he's like, "Ha! I'm gonna be a jerk and stomp on it."
Right? Just of course, you just got to stomp all over your dreams. Like I don't know what like. It's a bit silly, but I definitely, even if it is just kind of lifting from when they met Zoro in the manga, I like that Luffy takes the step to just like eat it off the ground.
Yeah, he gets a punch in, he eats it off the ground, declares it delicious. Again, it has those elements of One Piece at this time.
Yeah.
And just kind of remixed. Usopp doing this thing, Zoro doing this other thing, Luffy pulling a Zoro with the eating.
Yeah. It still all feels very in character, though.
It's their takes on it. We get Luffy, he's like, okay, you stomped on somebody's dream, I'm not all about this, it's time to fight.
Oh, yeah.
And... it's, of course, he sends out Golas, so it's time for the Zoro versus Golas fight. Yeah. And here's where we come into the anime's biggest weakness. Mm-hmm. These fight scenes suck.
They kind of do. Like, surprisingly so for a slightly, above average budget anime episode. And for how short these fights are. Like, I'm actually... genuinely, I was like, oh, it's okay.
I mean, there's just nothing to them.
Yeah.
Basically, El Drago's offering more money to Golas, and the more money he offers, the more powerful he seems to get. But then Zoro's like, you sold your soul as a swordsman for money, and you regret that. I can see you in your eyes. And then he does his finishing move.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's better than
no
nothing.
Fight.
Like yeah. I'm glad they had that one little wrinkle to it of just Zoro being able to sort of see through him and just boom, one shot, done. But yeah, it's definitely the fights are not the highlight of this movie.
No, and I think it's significant that it takes about 35 minutes to get into a fight, like an actual fight. And the fights are all but 5 minutes long.
Yeah, if that
between
even.
the two of them.
I think I can respect that. Like the fights are not this movie's priority.
Yeah, that I think that's to its benefit. I think.
Yes, very much so. Because you could spend too much time on the fighting and it would just feel even more like a nothing movie, which other One Piece movies certainly fall into that trap of just being pure action. Mm-hmm. So I respect the choice to sort of use your 50 minutes a little more wisely. But yeah, the fights are bad. There's no getting around that.
With it being sort of a double feature, it almost feels like a way to try to get people into, like, here's the basic fights, but here's the characters, here's the adventure, here's what makes us unique. And maybe I think that's kind of why One Piece has stuck around so much, because it has that adventure element. Like,
yeah, it's not just
Dragon Ball kind of lost its adventurous spirit as time went on. It focused on the fighting from where it does. But that fighting is also what got it popular, because the first arc was famously not as well received until they got to the tournament arc in Dragon Ball. One Piece has always found a way to kind of combine the two. And I think that's why the Namek Saga is always so beloved, because it has that sense of adventure, of trying to survive against impossible odds while also having this fight. It's a good balance. As far as the fight between Luffy and El Drago seems more devastating with his claw, like his gold fingernails, than his freaking voice.
Yeah, his actual devil fruit seems it's kind of not the star of the show here.
Yeah, because he keeps missing Luffy.
Yeah,
Luffy has a few tears on his shirt and whatnot, but he's using his bell, using his other stuff. But yeah, it's like with his fingernails and how his quickness there.
Yeah,
that's where he's getting his big hits in.
I kind of noticed this weird like start and stop pacing to this fight that kind of threw me out of it a little bit, where it is kind of like they kind of have an exchange, and then the ways in which they sort of go from one character having the advantage to, you know, the back and forth is a little odd to me. But,
it's like quick burst from El Drago, Luffy counters. Quick burst from El Drago, Luffy counters.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's cool to see him break the armor. Again, you have that sense of all that stuff.
Yeah.
And I will give it the benefit of the doubt because of the unique way that Luffy wins the fight.
Yeah, that surprised me more than anything. Like the way that he sort of absorbs the sound.
He absorbs the blast with his gum balloon, hangs onto El Drago's limbs so he just has it until El Drago loses like all of his basically can't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And just sends the blast right back at him, sending him off into the distance.
If this had more time to breathe, it would have been a really cool finisher.
It's just, I don't know. The pacing seems off, and we get our two fights in roughly, I'm watching it now, in roughly 7 minutes.
Yeah. I respect their choice. I think they made the better call by focusing on the adventure more than the fights, but these are not great.
it's only a little less than a fifth of the movie, so I think it works.
And of course, Luffy getting the finisher with the Gum Bazooka, as is par for the course at this point in the story.
We just got to blast them off.
Yeah, it feels good. El Drago, you will not be remembered.
No, definitely not. But they're all happy and like, okay, now we can go check this out. And that's when we kind of get our emotional crux, because they find Wunan's hiding spot, and Wunan is indeed dead. Mm-hmm. You can see his several years, in fact, because he's just a skeleton with some hair. That is absolutely the case. Tobio doesn't believe it, but you see...
Yeah, way to traumatize this little kid. Your hero's dead right in front of you, kid.
That man, it has a smell in that room.
Ooh.
But they actually discover a message from Wunan written on the wall.
How do you get up there?
Where basically he reveals that there is no gold. He returned all the money because it didn't mean anything. He remembered Gonzo's words about it not being able to laugh or cry or do anything. What he treasured was the adventure of actually finding it. And
that's the zinger, folks. That's it. We got, like, that was probably the most I'd ever felt something in this movie.
Yeah. And wouldn't it be something if this ends up being like a parallel to the actual finale of One Piece, where they find the One Piece is like, no, it's not about it. It's the adventure. It's the adventure of us getting there.
Yeah. I can't talk about this in detail in any way whatsoever, but the fact that like the core sort of emotional thread of this movie is about Oden. Specifically, Oden is very funny.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That is,
okay.
That is just one of those coincidences. It's like, oh, okay. Huh.
Sure.
Yeah. Yeah. It was
Unless Oda just really remembered.
he could have. Who's to say? Like, it just one of those things that I think it is probably not intentional, but is like one of those extra little layers of like that hits differently in 2022.
And the last little beat here is that Wunen's most prized treasure is the flag. The ripped flag that somehow survived. He stitched it back up from when Gonzo rescued him, saved him. And he always carried it with him and always had his friend's spirit with him as he did all this stuff.
Yes.
So
I love
no
it.
regrets.
Like, this is so much just like what all of early One Piece is about. Like, we had those bits, like with the buggy fight about like, treasure is this and that. And, like, no, the treasure is like what's in your heart. And I think that this movie being able to sort of call back to that and tie into that makes it feel right at home.
And you get this little emotional arc for Tobio is like, he learns to respect his grandfather. And the grandfather is like, hey, do whatever you want to do with your life. I'll just watch over you. So there's, again, it's not quite enough to get me truly emotionally invested, but it has that One Piece spirit.
Yeah. I think the simplest stories can sometimes be the hardest to tell. And like I sort of opened this episode with, like, this movie could have been so much worse.
Oh yeah.
I genuinely believe that. Like, the fact that it was able sort of to like have sort of a core message and a core theme, and that they never strayed from that, and it's just like they got in, they got out, and said what they needed to say is really, really important.
Mm-hmm. While still maintaining those character dynamics, having some great humor, and even some fun stuff like hey, Nami gets some treasure in the end.
Yeah.
She gets her treasure back as well as the treasure from El Drago, and goes to pay their bill, of course, with the interest. And Gonzo says, no, I don't want to have the money. We'll give it to you interest free because have you a loan interest free.
Yeah.
Because we want you to come back to us someday.
Wait,
that is never going to happen.
Yeah. I had this little discussion with my girlfriend after I saw film Red for the first time, where I kind of appreciated the what that movie did in terms of like weaving itself into the canon, and how like these sorts of stories can have really annoying like, we'll meet again someday. No, we won't. And that is something that movie I think manages to avoid in a really smart way. But like, yeah, so much, and the manga itself, of course, like there is almost no wasted space in terms of characters. So it does. I got a little kick out of it in this movie when they do the, come back again someday, and it's like, no.
No. I do get that little nice little. It's like that man will definitely become the Pirate King.
Yeah. Like it's another stop on one of Luffy's potentially infinite adventures, and I think this movie is okay.
It is perfectly okay. I would give it I'd give it a 6 out of 10.
Yeah. I think a 6 seems fair. I would go as far as to say
above average, but not fantastic. Some elements definitely appreciate. Like, I love that the credits are just filled with those animal covers.
Yeah. God,
colored in. Like, that's gorgeous.
Yeah. And they got that like the little tease of Sanji, because that's where the anime is going next at this point in time. You sort of see the little Oden boat, like he sort of sees it go by the Baratier, and he's like, oh, what the heck? And it's just like a cute little like 3-4 second like tease.
It's a fun little moment, and again, 6 out of 10, not bad at all, kind of average, but also has its moments that make it stand out above other similar anime movies.
For sure. I would go as far as to say that, like, going forward for the next little bit, I think this should be the baseline. What this is the bar. It's not a very high bar, but like you have to try.
Right. Yeah. We'll see how they match it.
Yeah.
I honestly can't remember.
Yeah, I haven't seen most of these early ones, so I'm interested to sort of see how they compare to this one, which is
And it's been years for me, so I didn't remember El Drago. I didn't remember Tobio. I didn't remember Wunan.
I've
most
already
of this I
forgotten
did not
Tobio.
remember. So it's a fresh experience for me.
Yeah,
but it's still kind of fun in its own way. So yeah, that was One Piece, the movie. Anything else to say?
God, no, not really. Other than like I said before, the this movie actually being animated on cells, I think does so much for just like the vibe. I think it is still this unique little time capsule that like nothing else in One Piece has this look and feel, and that I think goes away to sort of adding to the immersion factor and adding to the sort of like special. That's to the appeal of what this movie is. Like it's just a fun, cute little like 50-minute side quest. But
it feels nostalgic.
It does feel nostalgic. It feels very nostalgic. Like even in a way that like the early episodes of the anime don't feel, just because that they're already animated digitally in 1999. Like it just. I don't know. They nailed it. One other thing I did want to hit, and oh gosh. Okay, yeah, I had the tab open for it. The director of this movie was one Junji Shimizu, who goes on to direct the next 2 movies, as well as the 8th one, or 9th one, sorry. But he is apparently still working at Toei Animation even today. He's a director mostly for Pretty Cure, which is Toei's like long-running sort of like magical girl anime series. And he directed the season 0 of Yu-Gi-Oh, right?
Yes.
That season got a movie, and he directed that movie.
Oh wow.
Yeah, it's a movie that is sort of like kind of doing its weird take on like the Yugi versus Kaiba Death Tea bit, but like in its own weird microcosm. And they fixed Kaiba's hair in that one. That's sort of the only thing I remember about it.
Nice. So, yeah, I guess with that, I believe we've said all we've wanted to say about One Piece, the movie. Thank you so much for listening, and you can find more of my ramblings and stream VODs over at BitNerd Games on YouTube or BitNerd with an underscore at the end on Twitter. And Brandon, where can everyone find you at?
I'm at Brandon Bovia on Twitter for the time being, talking about, the usual anime manga games in my job, playing God of War Ragnarok, having a blast. Yeah, no, that's it. Read Kaiju number 8. It's great. Dragon Ball's still on hiatus. I don't know when it's coming back.
At some point.
Yeah, at some point soon. I don't know. Take all the time you need, Toyotaro. He hasn't taken a break at all. So if he's gotten 4 months off, all more power to you.
Yeah. Sounds good. And if you'd like to help us out more, you can support the podcast over at patreon.com/Derek Bittner. That's DERRICKBITNER to listen to the next episode 3 days early. And make sure to return next time as we discuss the second One Piece movie, One Piece Clockwork Island Adventure. Until then, my friends, bye.
Remember to take life one piece at a time.
No, なんだってめえは。あれ？俺はルフィ、海賊王になる男だ。ちなみにこいつはゾロ。